and I wanted to welcome everyone to the Fire Speaker Adoptee series on Fireside Adoptees. And we're very happy tonight to have Rebecca Autumn Sansom, who was the producer of Reckoning with the Primal Wound. It's just recently come out and has been a buzzing conversation for a lot of people in the community, for involving people in the triad from different perspectives. Wonderful film. I've seen it a couple times now. I know a number of us have, and some of us are in the Adoptee Army, which is really exciting. The list of credits at the end of people who've offered emotional support and goodwill for what's going on with the production and saying, yes, this mirrors our experience, and we want to affirm that in you. We're really excited to have you here and looking forward to a conversation tonight that will be allowing you to express more about your own story and then talk something about the production of the film and how it's been impactful for you. So I wanted to start by just asking you the basic questions that people get asked as adoptees: where you were born and when, and then we'll talk some more about your past a little bit.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I've loved developing a rapport with you, Greg, on
Great.
like TikTok and Instagram. And thanks for watching the film. For those of you who have, if you haven't, I have a little way for you to do it that I guess we'll talk about later.
Sure.
So the first question was when and where was I born?
Yes.
I was born on October 28th, 1982. In Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
Yep.
And I was almost born in Memphis. My birth mother moved back to San Diego, so I was close to being a Tennessee-born adoptee myself.
Nice.
Very close. Her family was from there in the Missouri area. So 1982. So at this, so you would have missed the baby scoop era. A number of us are baby scoop adoptees, and I think there probably were some changes in, not as much as we would like, but some of the perspectives on adoption at that point. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because it kind of leads into the fact that in the movie you mentioned, or your friend mentioned from childhood, that she always knew you were adopted, or she couldn't really remember maybe when she found that out. But when do you remember finding that out? Because a number of us didn't find out until later on a little bit, and we're not as encouraged to talk about it in the era I was born in.
Yeah, that's funny that Amanda doesn't remember. She just always knew too. And I always said that, and then thinking about this, I was like, no, I totally remember the day they told me. I remember what the living room looked like. It was our old house that we only lived in until I was 6, and I think I was 3 or 4 at the time. But I totally remember that conversation because they were like, we got to tell you something. You have another mommy and daddy out there. And ever since then, it's like that David Brzezinski says in the movie, you ruminate on that. So it wasn't something we talked about again, but it was definitely something that I was like, I have another mommy out there. What? So I do remember that.
You do remember it as the experience. That I remember it as well. I was 10, which seems pretty old to me. I know a number of people, obviously LDAs, that are many more years beyond that when they find out. Yeah, and it's burned into my memory as well, the whole setting of it. I had to ask, unfortunately. I'm glad you were told, because I know a lot of people are unfortunately not told. So I lucked out happening to ask and didn't expect to hear what I did. I feel like the same thing that you just said, which is that there wasn't really any conversation about it after that point. It was kind of like, well, that's taken care of. And then my adoptive family kind of moved on. They were compassionate about it, but they never talked about it with me again until adulthood, when I had to raise it. I don't know if it was like that for you, that, hey, this is my reality.
Yep. That was how it went. I think they were coached or counseled that it didn't matter and not to even talk about it. That would be the best thing for me.
Absolutely.
I don't put it all on them, but.
Did it present a certain challenge to you as a child that, oh, this has reframed my whole perspective on, I mean, I know at that age of your life, you are still forming your identity, but I imagine it impacted you forever after that, and still something you'll be dealing with.
Which is, I guess, what kind of comes out in the film with the box and everything. Because I think that if you could know that your first parents loved you, that it would affect like your self-confidence and
Absolutely.
everything about your identity for sure.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the box for sure later on, because that was such a compelling part of the film, and even the way it ended, the last words that you had in there before the credits rolled, and then you mentioned the rapport that had been reestablished about it with your adoptive dad. I would like to talk about that a little bit as well later on here. But so at some point you decided you were going to find out about your bio family. And I'm wondering what the decision-making process was like for you. Is it just something you said, I've always wanted to do this, and maybe when I'm a certain age, I'll do that? Or were you encouraged to do it at all?
I'm glad you asked this, because it made me think about it more. And I really think that initially when I searched, when I was 21, I was in college, I think it was from microaggressions and those like being asked, do you know your real parents over and over again that many times? And like in college, when you're having those conversations with your college friends, and they're kind of like, okay, they want to know, so maybe I should want to know. And I just had that interesting thought today when I was thinking about these, that's why I tried to get the paperwork and everything when I was 21, and it failed when it was, that's really interesting, just because I didn't have the money, to go all the way through with it, or probably the motivation myself, since I think it was really coming from trying to please other people. Like, okay, yeah. I'll answer. I need answers. Apparently everybody wants to know.
Right. Your questions became what they were telling you should ask, I guess. Right?
I think so. Yeah. I think that's literally why I searched it first, because I wasn't fully out of the fog then. And Jill, my birth mother, was actually going through a divorce then. Oh. So I told her I tried to find her then. She was like, I wouldn't have been receptive to that at all then. So I know I hear from a lot of adoptees that are like, it's not working, it's so reunion's just not, it's like friction. Yeah. And that's how my story would be too. If I tried then, I don't know if I would have tried again, but hopefully. And then yeah. It was actually reading the book. So when I was 29, there was a study, and 29 is like the age that people search. Oh, like the most common age, which is, I didn't know that before, but the family dynamics were such that we were trying to plan an intervention for my brother, my younger brother, who's also adopted. And the interventionist who I found somehow, or was recommended, was an adoptee. And he asked me if I'd read The Primal Wound. And he was like the third person to tell me about it. And for some reason, the whole scenario, I was in Nashville. I lived in Nashville for 2 years during this time. So it was great that I was there so I could help with this. The intervention never happened, by the way. But I think now, even going through these again, it's like, what maybe I was just supposed to meet that interventionist that asked me, have I read The Primal Wound, to push me over the threshold of like actually reading it. So yeah. I read it, and that is when, since I was in Nashville, I could talk to my mom about it a little bit. And I asked her more questions, and she was the one that was like, maybe you should just try to find Becky's email address, which was the social worker. Mm-hmm. When we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I was like on my phone, and I found her email address. And I sent off an email to her, like she was literally in Papua New Guinea as like a missionary doctor person. So I didn't think she would get it. And then the rest is history. It's
amazing. And you said the timing was such that earlier in your life, Jill wouldn't have been receptive of it because of what was going on.
That's what she says. Wow, she was that's fortunate. Not even that receptive when it happened. If you notice, like I did pull that one email sentence where she's like, where Becky's like, she's not sure she wants to meet. And that was gutting, because sure. I thought it was like a sure thing after we'd been corresponding through Becky for a week or two.
Mhm.
And then to get that sentence, I was like, oh yeah, she could totally not want to meet. Okay.
Yeah. I remember one of the quotes you had was that you were prepared for anything. I was ready for any reaction. You said about meeting your family in the larger sense, but it sounds like at first, yeah, it's a big shock when you think maybe this isn't going to happen after all. I'd had this in my mind that it was going to work out this way, and it seemed to be, and then it turned out that it didn't feel that way entirely. And I relate to that. I think my birth mother was very excited. I know she was, but she was shocked because I just called her out of the blue. She had no idea I was ever going to contact her. And that was probably the bravest thing I ever did. But it seemed like, even though the reunion's fallen apart in more recent times, that I remember just saying, wow, she couldn't believe it. How did you find me? And I wonder there was a recording in the movie of a little bit of a phone conversation from, maybe that was 2012. I'm trying to remember what year you actually connected with her. But was that an actual recording of when you were on the phone with her, or was that from another time? No, okay.
That would be awesome if I had that.
I was wondering how you would have done that.
But great acting, right?
So you've explained how your parents were, your mom basically was, well, maybe it's time for you to reach out, and since you have these questions now, or it's been suggested that you have these questions. And then one of the elements of discovery must have been about the name Autumn, right? How did you find out about the name, and what were your thoughts about that when you found out?
Well, Jill had told me that because she just only called me Autumn in her head and two other people. So I'm Autumn. And so once we connected, that was, hey, Autumn,
Mm-hmm.
But I did go get my records from the state house in Tennessee where they had them. And, Nashville's the capital, so they were there. And around that same time, and I knew my birth name was Autumn, but still when I saw it, like the record keeper let me see them. We went in this little room. I don't know if anyone's done this, because you can't take them with you until you pay for all the copies. So it was like just this small room, and we were two of us in there. She's like watching me look at these records. And when I saw Autumn, I started crying.
Yeah.
When you see that original verse and just everything. So that is another thing that came to me today after going over these questions that might be a different thing.
Do you prefer to go by that now? I know I've referred to you that in emails, but I'm wondering what you go by, or maybe it's both. Like
the code switching is real. I really can and do and like that. So if a lot of adoptees prefer Autumn, and I love that. Like, I like that name. And then I think it's a good stage name because I'm an entertainment person. So that's why Rebecca Autumn Sansom is not my real name. Like, I could change it. My middle name's Allison. So it's a little confusing because my initials are on IMDb. People are just confused about what my name is, but I really think I could change my name to Autumn instead of Allison, because I don't resonate with Allison at all. I never use it, but legally I have to. And I've talked to other adoptees who have done that, or even made up names for themselves. And that's really gives them that agency that I think we're all looking to have more of.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are people in our group who are searching for their names right now. Maybe we'll hear from them later on, I hope. And
yeah, because we all get to talk later. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. To have questions about what that experience has been like for you, for sure. So Jill had a family, obviously. You've described that there was a warmth of reception from the kids because they did know. She did tell them when they reached a certain age about you. And I'm wondering, as those relationships unfolded, you mentioned you have an adopted brother as well, right? An adopted brother. did you feel the qualitative difference of the biological relationships as you were exposed to them?
I think so. And it's interesting because, of course, I didn't use but 5 or 10% of the interviews I got with my siblings. But Christopher, who is only 6 years younger than me, talked about how it made so much sense when he found out about me, because he always, even though he's the oldest, he always felt like he wasn't the oldest and that there was that he had an older sibling. And like he had this real strong sense. So that's also interesting. There's so much footage I should put on the YouTube channel because it's really so much juicy stuff to like cover with all of these things. But yeah, I think, and then I only had a brother growing up. So then having the 2 sisters has been great. And it's so, I feel like I'm probably the closest to Claire because we have a lot of this similar interests. And so we've actually started working together. Like if you were there on Saturday, she's an event planner and can stage manage like a boss. So she was running the panels. She did absolutely stage manage and program and cue the whole Wavy Awards that we did in October in New York City, which was a beast of a thing. I put more cues in than a like Broadway musical apparently. And she did it. Like she pulled that off.
Wow.
So we've gotten the closest, I think. But that took until now, and we've been in reunion for 10 years.
It does take a long time. It's taken that long for one of my brothers. First, he was like, "Can I ask you what your intentions are?" and things. I'm not going to date my mother, so I'm trying to connect with my family, and he was kind of leery of me. But he's the one who now volunteers things to me and talks to me. It took a long time. It's
like that long, like years and years.
Yeah, probably 10 years almost.
Oh yeah.
For him suddenly to just start texting me and say, "Hey, I'm doing this today. I'm doing this," and it's a dream come true for an adoptee to have a biological sibling be reaching out and talking to everybody. I know not everybody gets that, and meaning not everyone gets to experience that, unfortunately. But I certainly understand how it must have been for how that developed. One of the more touching parts of the film was you at the reunion, and how you were with everyone and yet alone in a lot of ways, and you were, I think the way you described it is you were sensing everything that could never be. There were so many things that could have been and never were going to be, and that's very relatable. And it was, I don't know if the wedding was at the same time, your brother's wedding at the same time as the reunion, or if they were just close together in time. But
no, that's the thing. They weren't really. That was in the summer, and they had just gotten engaged. And so I hadn't thought about, and I knew the wedding was going to be in February.
Oh.
So I wasn't thinking who's going to be in the wedding yet. But then I was confronted with that because Claire, Candace, my sisters, and then Kylie, Christopher's fiance, left together. And I like witnessed that, asked Jill, and she just told me that they were going to have a bridal brunch the next day.
Yeah.
And so and out of 8 years, I'd never considered that anything like that would ever happen or shake me.
Yeah.
Like, or where I couldn't handle it. Like, where I was like, oh, I guess I'm not in the wedding. Well, okay, that's fine. She doesn't have to have me in the wedding. What was I thinking? But I hadn't it all breached that thought yet. So it just hit me. And then Jill was busy. Like she had her whole family there and couldn't talk, which ended up being great because I was like, I have to talk to somebody. And Steven, my husband, was with Frankie Joe. And so I was like, I'm going to do a confessional. So, which ended up being, one of the most compelling parts of the film.
Sure was.
So, yeah.
Is that where the question came from when you were talking to your brother about, do you hate me and you want me to die? Was it related to that?
Yeah, and that was like, I think cumulative because that and just really, it was this one situation where they,
Okay,
like Christopher and Kylie and Stephen and I, we were all going to hang out one night, but they wanted to take separate cars. And I don't know why, but that was what I overthought that to the point where I got to, they probably hate me and want me to die.
that's actually what I wanted to bring up, because I relate to that question to him, and I could see his expression like, well, I wasn't expecting to be asked that. I felt that way about my family. I think it's an adoptee response, right? It just,
I hope so,
it comes out. And somebody be like, wow, that's really a crazy overreaction to something that I didn't even know was happening. But it describes this fear of abandonment or missing out and not being connected and insecurity, and it brings all this trauma to the surface for me. When I saw that part in particular, I thought, yeah, I probably would have asked a question like that as well. even though I didn't know the full context of what was going on with it. And I remember someone in the call on Saturday kind of asked you what was going on when that happened. So I appreciate you explaining how that came about now, and that's more understanding it. But I think it is an adoptee question, at least for a lot of us. It was certainly the way I experienced a lot of things with it as well.
I got another message about that today from another adoptee that resonated. Oh. And that's the first time I've heard people talking about that specific part. So that's interesting. And I'm glad that it's also that you get it. And it's kind of delusional because
I got it for sure. That it feels that way. I heard an interview on Adoptees On where some guy had said the same thing, that I wasn't hearing from my sister as much, so I assumed she hated me and all these things. I thought, yeah.
Yeah, and then somebody's saying, like, kind of when you do feel like you're being ghosted, even though, just people aren't going to reply for like a day, it doesn't mean that they hate you and they want you to die. But
it feels that
way.
We're
going to think that
your nervous system kind of experiences
yes,
that.
We go to that fight or flight.
Yeah, that's actually what I want to get into with the next part about talking about the primal wound. So first of all, at some point you connected with Nancy Verrier. You said it was a little difficult to get her to want to talk, maybe like years took to actually engage her. How was that to get to know Nancy?
It took about 6 months. Okay. And she had literally just broken both of her ankles. I still don't know how, but that's the reason she said it was so hard to connect with her. But obviously, after building up a rapport and living so close, like being in the same region, made this all happen. So,
do you find that out of her books that there are certain themes that resonate most strongly with you about the primal wound or coming home to self or anything like that?
Yes, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but I did put some coming home to self themes in the movie. Mm-hmm. The neurological part, that's what the first part of coming home to self is, and I think that's really good to read. And then the siblings part, she does a section on siblings in coming home to self. So those two things were from that and not the primal one. But you want to know like the passage that I think made me cry?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
because
I don't want you to have to cry. I just mean, we're definitely
like when you're reading the primal wound and like you're kind of okay, or maybe it's the first sentence for some people, but it wasn't. I think it was like on page 12, so pretty early on, but like that second paragraph where it's like, what adoptees need to know is that their experience was real. Adoption isn't a concept to be learned, a theory to be understood, or an idea to be developed. It is a real life experience about which adoptees have had and are continuing to have constant and conflicting feelings, all of which are legitimate. Their feelings are their response to the most devastating experience they are ever likely to have, the loss of their mother.
Yeah, and I'm seeing people's response in the chat to things that we just talked about with the relation of what it's like to to feel that emerge and come out of you about your deep feelings, that they're pre-verbal, they get formed when you have no language. The separation happens, and it leaves this indelible imprint, and it's interesting. It's not just interesting, it's frustrating to hear people want to discount that. And I credit one of my friends on TikTok, one adoptee, who said it's like there's 50 people in a crash, a major crash, and the society wants to hear about the 25 people that were okay, and they don't want to hear about the people that were not okay. Not that they just died or something, but the focus goes on the people that didn't have the trauma, I guess, or didn't react to trauma the same way. And I feel like as adoptees, we're all engaged in this. Yes, my trauma is real, that this happened to me, and there was an effect that it had. And I'm wondering if you think that with the primal wound and the relationship of the separation of the mother and child, and the way we see our nervous systems react to it and interact just almost reflexively without even being able to think it through. I'm wondering if you think that when that happens for people, that society just has a hard time believing that things are really that way, or they just don't want to hear it. There's definitely a social aspect of dimension of adoption that people just don't really get comfortable with talking about.
Yeah, and I think it's what you're saying. It's the happy story is what people want, and probably everything they can get. But I think that's why the primal wound's so compelling. It's because it's the alternate narrative, and that's why it's kind of a relief to us as adoptees to read it. And that's why it's so impactful, because and what I'm saying about that passage, and that's why I cried the first time, is I'd never been told my experience is real.
Yeah.
Mother loss is a thing that's going to affect you, and that's okay. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Why haven't I been in therapy?
I think that there was a quote from, I think it was Paul Kimball, who said something like, we remember our mothers.
Oh, in the beginning.
Yeah, that was really compelling as well. We remember.
I know the way he delivers that and just says it is kind of, you have the gravity of how Nancy said it. It's like you believe it.
Yeah.
And we know it. So Paul saying it was, I loved that, how he said it.
It was powerful, the way it was all lined up.
And we do know our birth mothers.
We know. Yeah, he even put it in the present tense too. Yeah, we knew and we still know. We knew so many things about our experience has not removed that from us, even though people think you were young, someone else took the place of your parents and there's no problem here. And really it's not experienced that way at all by the child. And Nancy said it herself in the film, that as an adoptive parent, I love this child unconditionally, just there's no difference to me. And I hadn't realized that maybe it was different and it mattered to the baby. And I thought, yes, that's exactly what I would say. That was powerful to hear as well.
Yeah, and the fact that she got that and was able to put it into words, like she says, is huge. And I'm glad more and more people are like reading the book and like receptive of this message now. That's why it's exciting to like have our little adoptee army.
Yes.
Maybe get listened to.
Absolutely. And I see one of the, Rich said something here, which is great.
Yeah.
And you actually mentioned it in the film too, what you were feeling, experienced, a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And I think you actually used those words in the film, that finally you knew that this happened to me and I'm not weird or anything like this. It's something extraordinary happened. And this is a normal response to having lost so much.
Mm-hmm. But the primal wound was the first time I'd heard that. I think that's probably how a lot of us were. So
yeah,
just being allowed to feel real was huge.
I don't think so. My birth mother actually gave me the book. I didn't find it on my own, and I read part of it. It was like 15 years ago. I put it down. I didn't get through it. And then I convinced myself it wasn't true. And I moved, I resided in the fog for a long time. And then finally last year, I realized, oh my goodness, this is really what happened to me. And I was out of the fog and I was in the adoptee community and I was connecting with people who were saying, yes, this is a collective experience. Not that 100% of people experience it this way, but you can't deny what is a prevalent experience of so many people. And to have it invalidated socially, in the education system, and popularly, publicly, to have people come online and argue with people about what their experience has been, and say, and I've engaged in that as well, not in a belligerent sense, but trying to correct people that, you don't really know what you're talking about when you say that this didn't happen, or that's not a big deal, or it didn't happen to everyone. That's the other thing. Not all adoptees, or not my adoptee, or it didn't happen to me. And like I said, it's sort of like that incident of a big crash, and half the people are impacted and the other half are not, and all we get to hear about are the people that are fine. And it leaves the other people say, what about what I'm trying to communicate here? And they haven't gotten the chance, but I feel like the community, as it's opening up here, is finally giving people the opportunity to talk about it and say, this is collectively what we had. That's how the Adoptee Army came across to me, is look at all of these people. And it was wonderful to see the names of so many people that we all know and love and have interacted with. And I'm sure that was an overwhelming experience. It was for me. I mentioned I cried during the first time I saw those credits. It felt strong, like, wow, there's a real statement here. It's like we were all signing our names to this and saying, this has been the impact to us. How has that reception been to the Adoptee Army piece? We'll talk more about the
Oh
film.
yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah. That's a lot of people's reaction. There's 800 names.
Yeah.
So I guess it could be infinitely long.
Sure.
I'm behind. I haven't added like 20 since the screening. I don't know.
Oh,
maybe
really?
There's more than that. I didn't check. See, now once I get overwhelmed, then I just stop. I'm not going to add them for like a month. But that's a good thing about it not being out is that I can keep adding names. And I think the longer it gets, the more impactful it gets. But like what's even more interesting to me is like hearing from non-adoptee people that aren't like related to the triad at all. Like I had a music industry person come to the screening on Saturday because she's like a beast at networking. And her husband was just piddling around while she was watching it, but then he would stop and watch it. And it turns out, I mean, she knew this, but I guess didn't put the connection that her husband's mom is a birth mother and had to relinquish against her will in the 70s because she had a biracial child and she really didn't want to. She wanted to keep that daughter, and that's his sister. And so we had a conversation. It was like, yeah, wow. You didn't think you would be like that connected to this because you're not an adoptee, but like you're super connected.
Absolutely. Wow, that must have been interesting as well.
But not even my next door neighbors who are really not connected. I mean, they're like, okay, and have just had a friend who did the surrogacy program, and they're like, but like a surrogate doesn't have a parental load, right? And I'm like,
oh,
why wouldn't they? Like, you don't want to talk to me. I'm gonna burst your bubble. And now they're like, oh no, this is really making me think and totally change my mind about how I think about things. I'm like,
that happened with a friend of mine. He said my daughter was from an egg donor, and I'm starting to see something in her. And he said he wanted to talk to me about it. I said, yeah, we should talk about that. So I'm sure she's going through a lot, and I'm glad that he was open to it. I'm not donor conceived by or surrogate or anybody's, but just to be able to say, I'm sure that's had a huge impact on who she's becoming and what she's going through.
like the studies on that, because we weren't technically, but what's the difference?
Yeah, I think that's why so many alliances exist with the donor conceived community and the adoptee community. Is where, and I see the words in here about disenfranchised grief and things about it's being deprived of something so similar and so fundamental that we can't help but experience it in similar ways. And I think that forms some of these alliances within, like I said, within donor conceived and the adoptive community.
Oh my gosh, I should add them to the credits.
I saw some of them on the call or on the screening that I'm aware of. That
yeah,
yes, I did. I can tell you who that was later on if you'd like. Just I'm sure they had a very interesting perspective on that.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were aware of that or not, but yeah, definitely at least one person that I know of was watching that, and I wonder what she was thinking.
Yeah, me too.
So, at what point did you decide you were going to make a movie, to make the film?
No, it just was literally the universe being like, you have to do it. You're a pregnant person, and Nancy Berrier lives close, and your brothers and cousin are on the my brother and cousin were on the struggle bus hardcore. Wanted them to read the book, and then thought maybe a movie would be something more palatable. So all the stars aligned, and I started it, and then I didn't touch it for like a year and a half because I had too much good footage, but I did transcribe all the interviews. Wow. Which took forever. And that's how I know that I had so much good stuff, but it was too much good stuff. And so I just put it away and didn't look at it.
Did it come in waves of being overwhelmed? Like, wow, this is really impacting me. I have to set this aside for a while. Was it like that?
Yeah, because of the whole disassociation thing. And like, probably this is bringing up way more than I can deal with. And I had a newborn. But then the pandemic gave me some more time, and I did it. I just like took a crack at it. A lot of y'all helped me with the mother. If you watched the Mother's Day screening last year, and that was invaluable. So that is also why it's been this slow rollout. And I think that was part of it that was supposed to happen. And so I was able to grab more adoptees to be in it. Like that came to me after the first cut. It was like, wait, I want to put more adoptees in this movie. So I put out that call, like, tell me what the primal wound meant to you. And that's where that came from. But does that answer the question?
Yeah. In fact, I'm wondering what you felt if you had to say there was a certain element of the whole thing that was most transformative for you, being involved with the whole project and the production. Was there one or two things that impacted you the most out of doing it?
I went over these with Jill before this, and because that one was stumping me. I was like, I don't know. Oh. And she said, well, I think that you have grown so much through this, and that my self-confidence and like sense of agency has really transformed since, like, I guess releasing the film. And then the more of these I do, it is like so nice and empowering to hear the positive feedback and to connect with y'all and hear everybody's stories and like feel like the movie is having an impact. So that has done wonders for my self-esteem, like creating something that people want to see. I've never done that before. So that's great, because I needed to like do my own project, because I've always been behind the camera as either a freelance videographer or like I have to document and hire this artist. So I'm an artist manager. But that's somebody else's career. And I don't know if anybody else does that, or like totally puts other people and other people's careers and projects before your own, but that's what I've done my entire life. So just finally being like, okay, I'm gonna do me for the first time, I think is the answer to that question.
Great. Thank you for engaging with that. I know that we're getting along in time, but I wanted to ask you about how the scenes with your adoptive parents and some of the reactions they had in the film. For people who haven't seen that, there was some tension in there, right? Obviously, and a little discomfort. How did
that's why you
you
don't see a normal sit down with them, do you?
No.
You do with my dad, and you know what? That's the entire interview. I put the whole interview in there because it was 1 minute long.
You've always been here, or he said something like that, right?
Yeah. But I'm just saying he stood up and left after like one question. And my mom would never do it, but I couldn't not film her on my phone. She was like, "Are you filming me?" And I was like, but I was lying to her face. And then I knew that if I used it, I'd have to tell her, and I did. And I showed them before anybody ever saw it, and they gave me their blessing, and had no notes. And that's amazing. I shared that on an Instagram post, like my mom's actual text back to me, because I was so sad that whole week, because I just knew they'd pull themselves, because she said that. She's like, I don't want to be in it. I don't want my face in it. So I was like, she's 100% going to make me take her out. But she didn't. So there's some sort of like something going on with them, you know, as far as growth and understanding goes, which is cool. But it's not like they're ever going to come to a Q&A.
Okay, I was wondering. So it sounds like they did have some growth themselves through that, but it led up to one of this big compelling piece about the box. Do you want to tell people a little bit about the box? I know that could go on forever, but that was very powerful, and I'm sure people who saw that will know exactly what I felt when I saw that scene a couple times.
Well, it's a spoiler, but I guess, like, do you mean the last scene?
Oh, yeah. And we don't want to spoil the film, then that's fine. I just obviously it had to do with whether you were supposed to be giving something when you were younger that told you about your identity. I'll just say that. And
yeah, and I put that in the trailer. Like there's a box that I'm like, what? And then but then there's kind of a mystery of like, is it in the attic or somewhere?
Yeah.
But like, I don't know exactly what you're asking that you want to know.
I would like to know if it obviously it hurt you at the very end. You were hurt by it.
Well, that's another thing. I realized that the movie kind of goes over pages 10 and 11 of the book, where an LDA is talking about figuring out they were adopted when they were 33. And a lot of the feelings from just these 2 pages are in like big themes of the film. But how like secrets and betrayal, bad, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's like all page 11 in the primal.
Okay.
And there's been other books written about that, like the inner world of childhood and healing the hurt child, that talk about like what that does to create an atmosphere that isn't like ideal for children to be raised in. And so it was that whole, I never thought that you people, my parents were capable of like withholding something like this from me. Oh my God, you know?
Yeah. They withheld my name. So they denied, oh, we don't know, until I found my birth mother, and they said, basically, what can you prove it to us? What was the name? So then I found out, okay, you knew my name the whole time. You never had disclosed this to me. So
weird feeling. It's not a great feeling. It shakes like everything. And then of course you're going to have trust issues.
Yeah. It's interesting how I'm sure I'm not the only one in that, because I've been seeing other people who've had similar experiences. Maybe they weren't challenged to, oh yeah, if you're telling the truth, then what was your name? But there are definitely people who've had so much that's been withheld from them. I think that was that issue we talked about, the microfictions, right? That Amanda Bain brought up, where your story is kind of fabricated by somebody else in a lot of ways, right? And the parts of it that should have been your own just by virtue of being born are withheld from you, and the impact that has on the formation of your identity. And it feels like I think that's probably pretty relatable, and I don't want to give away too much about that part of the story of the film, because I do want people to see that. But I would just say that, and I think other people would agree, that was very powerful to see that as well. There were so many powerful elements of it. I wanted to ask you real quickly about the members of the triad. They showed up, they were in the screening. I'm not sure as much. I mean, I heard from adoptive parents who were in my group. I heard from birth parents who were in there. I'm wondering if you've collectively received a lot of feedback from different elements of the triad and what that's been like for you.
Well, I'm like super curious what other people are hearing, because I feel like I'm only going to get mostly the positive feedback. So that's mostly what I've gotten from adoptive parents, but I know that's not completely like everything, because it's going to be super woke adoptive parents who are into the film. And I know others have seen it that aren't like very receptive to the primal wound. So other people might have heard more accurate portrayals, but from birth mothers, they love it. Adoptees so far love it. That's great. And then I've connected with a lot of adoptive parents too, that really they have children that are in the fog. And so that's been really interesting, because it's like a dynamic I never thought I'd encounter. Like the adoptive parents not in the fog about adoption.
Yeah,
trauma,
that's really interesting.
But their kid is and doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but like clearly are exhibiting, like, because they've read the book. So they're like, no, but please read the book. Like, and they're like, no. So, isn't that funny?
Yeah, that is interesting. So they were advocating in a way for their kids that didn't know they needed to be advocated for yet.
Yeah, so that's
weren't at that level of awareness themselves. Yeah, that's kind of good to know that there are some of them out there doing that. That's encouraging.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why there's an adoptive parent army.
Yeah,
there's 4 on there, but
there's 4. Okay,
I think that also says something.
It does. Yeah, I thought that, and I wanted to conclude in just a minute here and give you a chance to speak about anything else that's important. But the question, or one of the recorded pieces, was you weren't able to get your mom on film, was her saying, "This is I think the author of The Primal Wound had a perspective," and that's what they were trying to get across. And you were saying,
oh yeah.
So yeah,
got the audio.
Yes, the audio part.
And if you look closely, she's in the corner of my computer screen. You can see her face. That's an Easter egg, no one really knows, but you can see her saying that if you look into the reflection. That's why I have it up. I'm like, maybe somebody will see that you can see her. But yeah, she's a science person. She like got her master's in chemistry. So she's very like, if you can't prove it, and no one's gonna studies about the primal wound.
That's right. Yeah, how are you going to prove that to people?
But you can kind of have with the animals when you don't take away the animals from their moms. So doesn't that count? Plus, whatever. But yeah, she's a skeptic. Said it's a hypothesis.
The hypothesis was the word.
A lot of people think that. So I think it's amazing that she said it. So we can talk about it.
Were you surprised by any of that response?
No, she said it before. We had this conversation for like a decade, but it was great to catch it. I don't know. I'm happy with everything I caught on camera. And I'm like, how did this all happen?
I wanted to give you a chance if there's anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't discussed. We certainly appreciate your time, and we'll go a few more minutes with the interview and then close out this part and then open up for questions if you have time.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I think it was like a really good conversation. And yeah, the only thing that I want to talk about is like my little self-care fund for adoptees, that where I take 10% of the proceeds of any screening and then divvy it up and give it to adoptees to take care of themselves for the month, which definitely means like a massage or a pedicure or like something that makes you happy and where you can zone out and just like not think about anything that gets you on the struggle bus. So gets you off the struggle bus. And that I'm doing the drawing tomorrow. So there's still time to like enter the contest, which is not even like, I don't know. It's now an obscure post in the Facebook group for the movie. So if you've joined that group, it's Reckoning with the Primal Wound, and I can send it to anybody who's not joined. But I did a graphic card that said to stay tuned, because I was going to do a post about it, but then people started commenting on that post. So I just let that be the post, but it's kind of confusing, which I like because it limits who can win. And I don't know. That's the post though. So now you know it's not super obvious. And last time I put it on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. But I don't want to do that anymore. I want to limit it because only 3 people can get it. Oh, is that the win? Oh, sorry, that was a direct message, but that isn't a win coffee with Nancy. That was like a raffle from January.
Oh, okay.
And the good thing will be that I do different things every month. So maybe we'll do the one-on-ones with Nancy again. But no, this is like, I give you money, you spend it how you want, but it has to be, you have to then tell me, and I'll probably blast it out, you know, and tell people what you did. But
people to take care of themselves that way. Yeah.
One person last month, Elise, she bought a bunch of the books. So she bought David Brzezinski's books and then Coming Home to Self, and also signed up for therapy.
Wow. That's great.
Which is not what I would have done at all. I definitely would have done the massage. Another person did the massage, like a 90-minute massage.
Wow.
So that it's like really fun. And that's all I'll say about that, unless anybody has questions. But
sure.
Again, thanks for having me.
What we'll do is I'll conclude the recording part of the interview, and then we'll go to a discussion, questions and answers real quick here. So let me conclude this. You'll hear it click off.